we'll call the meeting to order at 7 p.m. Roll call, it looks like everyone's here. And we'll need a motion to approve or to adopt the agenda.
So move.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Was that Mike and Karen? I couldn't see.
Was that Mike and Karen?
Leslie, actually.
I seconded.
Oh, Leslie.
Thank you.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Okay, we'll move into announcements, ACC and Finance Committee vacancies. Go ahead.
Yes, we do have two vacancies for the Finance Committee, and we have received so far 8 applications. I have sent them questionnaires and have received 4 of them back, but the applications are open until the 16th?
15th, I believe.
15th, okay, thank you.
I had a question.
Go ahead.
I had a question about the announcement. Wasn't it last meeting we said we had 3 openings until March?
I made a mistake, I'm sorry.
Oh,
Somebody
okay.
told me that that somebody else had resigned, and when I checked with them, they said no.
Okay.
Now we know there are 2.
Perfect.
And, I will tell you that the members are Karen Borchard and myself for the board, Colin Morrow, Penny Carter, and Tony Luzeo.
Thank you. Somebody asked me about that, so I said I would ask the question.
We have one ACC opening. To date, we have received 2 applications, and that time limit cuts out on the 20th of March.
20th of March, okay. Mike, did you have a question?
No, Mr. President, are the announcements that you're looking for just ABC here, or are you looking for just other announcements, regular? Otherwise, I have an announcement.
Let's get through, go ahead.
Go ahead, later. Want to do them during?
Go ahead now, sure.
Okay. I know that we have some authors in Sudden Valley, so we were thinking about having a Sudden Valley authors table at the rec center, you know, with the lending library stuff and the crossword puzzle, not the crossword puzzle, but the jigsaw puzzle is, and tables, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know if it's a good idea or a bad idea, but if you're an author or pretend, not pretend, but portend to be an author, and you think it's a good idea, tell Maggie, and we'll get a table set up and we'll have those books in one spot for everybody to look at. If it's a bad idea, just keep it to yourself.
Thanks, Mike. I have an announcement, and that is that the first quarterly coffee with the president and the GM will be held this Saturday, 10 to 11 in the multipurpose room A. Okay. Any further announcements before we introduce our guests? Okay. Joe, would you like to introduce our guests?
We have with us today, we have Tyler Andrews, president of PNW, and Gwen Hanks from Kingsworks Structural Engineering. They are the ones who, PNW does all of our construction for us. They are our project managers, as well as Quinn is the ones who, Quinn's company did the structural report for this barn. So there were some emails back and forth, so I just figured I'd bring them in, give you guys a chance to ask some questions instead of firing emails back and forth. That would be a lot easier. So, Tyler, Quinn? Yeah, right. Yep.
I'm Tyler Andrews with PNW.
Quinn Hanks.
So my understanding is there's questions by the board and we're answering questions, or?
I'm sorry, I guess I just, go ahead. Do you have questions? I think we're just kind of figuring out how the format goes. So I'm sorry if we're just staring at you.
What it is there was a lot of emails back and forth,
Yes.
so I figured I'd bring them in so you guys could ask some of your questions instead of trying to go through third parties. So whatever you guys want to talk about. Tyler, I was asked by the board to get a structural report report of this building to see if this building was structurally sound. Tyler is our project manager. I put it to him since he does all of the work that we do with that, and he hired Quinn to do that report. Tyler does have all of the other reports that were done here. So, again, if you guys have any questions for them about the report, that's why they're here.
Mr. President, might I ask if there's a question to be asked by the board, would they please raise their hand so I can write them down? Thank you. Mr. President, Josh.
Linda was actually first. Thanks for coming in, guys. Could you give us like I know we have the report, but can you give us like a really high level description of what all you did in your report, so the community can hear it as well? Some of the stuff in the report, like for someone like me who doesn't understand engineering, it's a little much. So it'd be kind of nice to get, just overall.
Absolutely. So we took a fairly high-level approach for what was originally submitted here, just this last month. So Quinn with KingWorks has been familiar with all three barns out here, barn 6, barn 7, and barn 8 to some extent here. When Joe originally asked us about doing the analysis, to do a full structural analysis of a building, there's a lot of different degrees and how that can be done. What we did was basically come into the building with a set of 2-page drawings that we had. We did a little walk around. We looked at the exterior condition of the building, noting some things where there's issues, not issues. Then we looked throughout the building at any areas where we could see existing framing without cutting holes to verify everything else that's hidden. For example, how this ceiling is framed, the roof structure. We can't see that unless we start opening stuff up to view it. There are 2 areas in the barn though where we couldn't see, and one is through the storage closet here. We can see part of the roof structure, and then back by the pool area is another open area where the ceiling is out, and we can see some of the framing, we can see some of the columns and various things. This barn is very similar from aesthetically, from the outside, and what appears to be similarities with the framing based on barn 7. And barn 7 has previously had a full structural analysis done on it by KingWorks, and there's been a few other reports that were completed as well. So we essentially came in to barn 8 trying to verify how similar did this really seem at a first glance to barn 7. And with that, the 2 site visits that Quinn and I did, it looks very similar. Now aesthetically, this barn is finished out, so from that standpoint, it looks quite different. But from a structural framing standpoint, with the way the beams, the columns, and everything else are, the buildings appear to be quite similar. So with the report that we originally submitted, Quinn went back to verify, based on our initial site visit, if the barn 7 data he had from previous pictures and calculations and everything seemed to be applicable to this building. And then we did a second site visit to verify a few more components that he'd revisited with the barn 7 stuff that he'd previously seen. And with that, we made a lot of assumptions based on conditions that were found in barn 7 when that was open and the full report was done, based on the similarities with this structure. So from an overview, we have not done a full structural analysis. We've just kind of done a, based on layout, based on similarities between the 2 barns, this is what we believe we would find if we start doing a full structural analysis. What a full structural analysis would really be, if we really wanted to go that full depth, it would be, for example, we would need to verify how all the roof connections are, how all the columns attached to the foundations, is everything up to current seismic code? And really the big question of how to proceed is, how does the community, how does the board want to use this building? Are there modifications that want to be done to it in terms of a renovation? Is it major? Is it just cosmetic stuff? Or is it just trying to understand that the building is generally safe and sound as it is. And from that intent, we can help tailor how to move forward with a more in-depth analysis of the building if we need to start cutting access holes and looking at what things might or might not to do, so that we're efficient with everybody's time and ultimately the community's money.
Thank you. Mr. President, Linda?
I guess I was kind of disappointed because a lot of the language that was in this report is like a cut and paste from Barn 7. And to me, Barn 7 and this barn are two different barns. They're like apples and oranges. You know, that barn, I can look at some of the extra structural stuff on the beams in here. I know for a fact those weren't there in Barn 7 before it came down. This building has been waterproofed quite well. That building leaked like a sieve. The bottom floor is all finished. We use all that. The beams and the bottom of the Barn 7 were used for car storage for golf, and half of it was nothing but, instead of cement or any kind of a covering, was simply dirt. And there's pictures of when the library people built in there, just how badly some of the beams were rotted from sitting in conditions like that. And I'm kind of disappointed because I don't think a lot of that is reflected in your report. So, and I guess that's kind of how I feel about the whole thing.
I'm gonna let Quinn do an initial response to that.
So the two buildings structurally are pretty similar. I mean, the components, the members are almost identical between the two of them. That being said, this one is enclosed. That may mean that it covered up all those things that we didn't see. There's an entire possibility that before the first 30 years, my understanding, and I didn't know this until the other day, this building was built around the 60s. So, and then that just came through an email. I don't know who sent that, but they said there was a flyover in 61 and another one in 67 where the three barns showed up. Before that in 61, there was only one here. So theoretically, this barn was built in the 60s. It's been enclosed maybe 30 years. It had 30 years as an agricultural building. So without opening up the structure, I can't tell you if this barn is in better condition than barn number 7. There isn't any way to tell that without doing some destructive testing. And the thing I'll say about destructive testing is it's expensive. I'm going to pull this out for a minute. That's a little better. So, yes, there is a lot of things that are similar. There's a lot of things that look different between the two. And we could spend a whole lot of money, review this building, and come up with a similar report to what we did in building number 7. However, before we do that, I would like to get some feedback as to what direction everybody wants to go with this building. Is it worth my time to spend $20,000 analyzing this building for something that nobody wants to change? If it works as it is now, why not leave it? And there's no reason to spend a lot of money telling you, hey, it's here, it's been working, and it'll probably continue to work for a little while. So as for the condition assessment, yeah, there may not be rot in this building. However, there may be 30 years of rot that's just covered up that we're not seeing. I can't tell you that. I can tell you in the mechanical room, when we went in there were several beams that I took pictures of and looked at that did have significant rot in them. So there's a good chance or a high probability that those same areas, maybe not to the extent that Building 7 had, but there probably is significant rot areas in this structure as well. So the big comparison between Building 7 and this building, or Barn 7 and Barn number 8, without spending a lot of money, that's my best option for giving you some idea of what I expect to find in this structure. When we went through Barn 7, we spent a fair amount of time and money going through and providing upgrades and saying, okay, we think the end wall should be increased, or made better. Several columns up here were looked at for repair and increase in strength. I do have pictures from Building 7, and these tension rods look almost identical to Building 7, so they were in that building as well. They're really, structurally, they're a lot more similar than different. So I'm trying to respond to your question, but you know, I think the end result is if we go through and spend a lot of money on a structural analysis, we're probably going to come up with the same deficiencies that we found on Building 7. That may not be the case, but without spending a lot of time, money, and energy, I can't tell you that for sure. I just don't think it's worth spending that without, hey, we do want to go through looking at a major change in the structure. Probably the biggest thing is, and this is something that I need to know to move forward, is what do you want to do with the structure? If it's left as is, it falls under what we consider the IEBC, or Existing Building Code. And as long as you don't change the structure, nobody is going to come in and say, look, you need to do a full seismic upgrade. The things that require that are if you make a 10% change in the lateral system, or a 5% change in anything gravity, or you change the occupancy. There's a couple other things on valuation and different things that the other code gets into, but that's the three main things that structurally require an upgrade. So if we come in here and you say, hey, we want to take out a bunch of walls, we want to cut new windows, then this building probably needs to go through a full seismic upgrade and we can spend a lot of money. If you want to leave it as is, it works fine now. You're going to be limited to future uses, future changes, but it works. Does that kind of briefly give you not a quick answer, but a good answer?
Yes, it does. One real really quick question is you talked about seismically. I know that I believe when the library, people put the library in, they put on the special cross pieces that you do to improve the columns and stuff. Is that something you do easily, or no, you'd once again have to have it down to bare wall?
The biggest thing I see with this structure is I can't find any indication of lateral shear walls designed for this building. That's something that for wind and seismic keeps the building from tilting sideways or falling over. There is a lot of gypsum wallboard walls, and that is providing a significant amount of restraint in this building. However, because it hasn't been designed, I don't know how it's connected to the structure. I don't know if this structure is leaning on those walls, or those walls are just hanging out, floating in the structure. Without ripping stuff up in destructive investigation, we won't know.
Thank you.
Mr. President at AJ?
All right, I have a couple questions. You know, based on your recommendations you provided, you talk about occupancy, changing uses. One of my big questions is if we just keep using this building the way we're using it, that doesn't require any significant upgrades or anything. You do still recommend several upgrades to the structure if we just continue as is, such as the shear walls and stuff like that. Is that, barring having you do a bunch of destructing testing, in 2012, our reserve study told us that we should rehab the exterior of this building, new roof, new siding, new windows. Is the stuff that you've recommended that we would do if we just continued as is, if we're already ripping the siding and stuff off to put new siding on, I'm assuming adding shear walls at that time is a relatively easy accomplishment to do in relation, since you kind of have opened up the outside of the building.
So that would be a good time to look at it. I wouldn't say it's going to be expensive no matter how you go about it. When we add shear walls, if you took off the siding, we could add sheathing to the outside. That's just OSB and a nailing pattern. The other component that goes along with that is a foundation element to keep it from overturning or sliding. The foundation in this is probably inadequate for a shear wall. So there would be places where you'd probably end up saw cutting into the foundation, digging up and putting in new foundation elements to support that shear wall that we put in above. So it would help when you take off the siding and put on some, it would save some money and probably startup costs, but it's still gonna add a fair amount of expense to make that retrofit.
And if you take the siding off, would we be required through the planning department to make those upgrades then at that point? Or do we even need permits to re-side a building?
I don't know on the permits for siding. Even a new roofing job usually comes with a permit these days. So better to check and see before you do that. So the things, again, structurally that require that upgrade are the 10% change in lateral system, 10% lateral, 5% gravity, or a change in occupancy. Now, there is a valuation I think that the city has also. If you do more work than, and I don't know this for sure, this is more in the architect's world, I think it's 50% the valuation of the building. If you exceed that with one of your retrofits, then they make you bring the building up to code. So you'd want to make sure that you didn't exceed any of those requirements when you cited it to make those changes and not be required to bring it up.
Okay. So, we don't, let's assume the assumption of there's no shear walls is correct. This thing's been standing since the 60s. It hasn't blown over, barring, some seismic catastrophe that happens, which, a great deal of buildings in this entire county would fall to the ground happening. Like, could we just re-side it? Obviously, the siding has deteriorated quite a bit. If you go back and look at some of the previous reports, like the Arrow report in 2013, they recommended painting and staining of the whole building within 2 years, and then every 5 years after that. I'm not sure that any of that's happened. And within 20 years, also doing a full re-siding, but they recommended for sure a number of repairs as well to the siding structure because it's kind of been piecemealed together as cuts have been made into the siding for new outlets from things that need to vent and things like that. Is going that route. We continue to use this building as we've been using this building the way it is for decades now, basically. If we were just to re-side it, don't worry about the seismic activity. At the end of the day, if we do a bunch of retrofits to this building in particular, is that even going to guarantee that a building of this age stands in some sort of seismic event? That's more on the major side.
So typically when we design a building, even in today's codes, we design it for life safety, i.e. it's designed so that a person can make it out of the building without it collapsing on them. And that's what we consider life safety. There's other structures like fire departments, schools, things like that are essential facilities that we design to a little higher value so they can be usable after the event. But typical design is after a seismic event, even to today's code standards, we design it so that it doesn't fall down on you when you get out. Beyond that, the building doesn't need to be usable, it doesn't need to be occupiable, it doesn't need to be anything other than it didn't collapse on them. So we could do a whole lot for this building and make it better than it is now, and it still would only need to stand up to meet code.
So just to clarify that statement, you're essentially saying if we did seismic retrofits to this, basically in a major event, the building would still pretty much be unusable after the fact. It'd just allow people the ability to get out of the building at the moment.
It provides a life safety level of occupancy for the structure. Whether this building has that now, I don't know. Like I said, there's a lot of gypsum shear walls downstairs. They do provide a lot of value. The code doesn't allow it to be used these days. We would not design a gypsum shear wall as a lateral resisting element. So again, without a involved analysis, it's pretty hard to say, you know, where this structure is. It does have some faults, it does have some deficiencies. It's not the best structure, but it has been standing for a long time, and nobody is gonna come and tell you, hey, you have to upgrade it, you have to bring it up to code, as long as you stay away from those three elements of structural changes and the economic or the valuation of the structure. And again, I would talk to the city because I'm not positive that's the architect's world on that 50%. If your siding exceeded 50% of the valuation, then you may have to do a full structural upgrade.
And so the 10% and 5% you talk about with respect to lateral and gravity loads, is that something, that increase comes from an increase in occupancy typically? Like if we continue using this the way we are using it, we shouldn't exceed those values?
So that 10% limit is on the original building. So if you look at this, it's already exceeded that 10% when they added everything else in. So reality is you really cannot change this structure from its existing use or its existing without bringing into the fact, okay, now you got to upgrade it. That means no new windows. You can put new windows in and repair and replace in kind, but you can't change the layout of the structure and make major changes to it without requiring the seismic upgrades.
So just to clarify on that, then, if we did new siding, we replace windows in kind with same, basically you're saying same size windows, we couldn't add new windows or anything like that?
Yeah, you're going to be very limited as to what you can do with this structure and what you can change. You want to leave it identical. The one thing the code allows you to do is you can make it better off or leave it better off than you did today. So say you came in and put on metal siding instead of the wood or something like that and lightened up the load. Something like that would improve its ability, and you could go through and say, we're not increasing or making it worse off than it is today, and sometimes you can get away with that.
Okay. And then one thing that was stated in here, in your recommendations, was the second floor, which we're on right now, live load should be limited to 60 PSF maximum. Do you think that's consistent with what we're doing in here now typically, or are we exceeding that 60 PSF?
So I figured that question had come up. I prepared. So if, let's take a 300-pound person, i.e. a workman with his tools and tool belt on, everything, that's usually what we use in the code. If you had a person 300 pounds standing in an area and they were taking up 2.5 feet by 2.5 feet of square area, that's pretty reasonable. I can put my arms out and be a little bit past that. That amounts to about 48 pounds per square foot. So in order to get to a 60 pounds per square foot number, if you took a 200-pound person and they occupied a 1.8 by 1.8 square feet, and that's pretty close, and you had people standing that way all the way around this room, that would get you to about 60 pounds per square foot. So it's a lot more close than comfort. It's a packed elevator is about 60 pounds per square foot, and you'd feel uncomfortable standing that close to people.
But like, let's take what we got going on here right now. We're probably not quite at that level then, due to like not filling this whole space.
Yeah, not even close. I mean, it's nowhere close to 60 pounds per square foot right now.
Okay.
I don't think that number is going to limit you or your uses up here a whole lot.
Okay. All right, that's good to know. And then I guess my last question is, do we know, there's like a flat section, was that built on, or is that part of the original structure, this flat roof out on that side?
I don't know. I'm not positive.
Does anybody know?
Yes.
Leslie
No,
knows.
that was built as a walkway between the two buildings, and for, I'm not sure what, it was there when the barns were originally built, and that flat roof has been the bane of our existence since that time. It keeps collecting water and collapsing.
Do you know when that went in, Leslie?
I'm sorry?
Do you know when so that was an addition onto this barn? Is that what you're saying?
No, between the two barns. It went from one barn to the other,
But it was always there?
as far as I know.
Okay.
We have more information in the back if we're interested in the details. Is that, may he come up and answer?
Yeah, from the information that we had when we took a look at this back in 2017, maybe I turned this off. There we go. Back in 2016 and 17, and we took a look at these. We did take a look at the history. That flat section area was an addition to join the two buildings together. It was not original. It got a major upgrade, at least they thought it was an upgrade at the time, in order to accommodate some of the heating equipment that at one time did provide a level of comfort to the downstairs area, particularly the part that's called the sunshine room that was used for kids. I'm not sure now whether that is still being used for heating. You'd have to talk with Joe about that, but it is definitely not part of the original structure.
Do you know approximately when? Do you remember where that went in?
It was well before I moved here, and no.
So it wasn't like added when we redid Barn 7 or anything?
Not at all.
Prior to all that?
It was very, very much prior to
And
that.
say it's been here since 1999.
Okay.
Can you go back farther than that, Linda?
It's been here since 1996.
Okay.
There you go. But as we all know, the community took over all of the amenities in 71. And so the barns were here well before then, and there was a lot of things that happened between 71 and 91, we'll call it. That's 20 years. So that's what I'm aware of, and all of the material that Wilson Engineering looked at and produced for the 2017 analysis and projection for what could be done with this, that would have far more detail.
Thanks, Larry. Do any other community members have any historical background on this subject? Are we okay to take questions from members, or do we want to?
I have one question. When Barn 7 was
Board
taken
first, and then
down,
we'll take member comments.
we discovered that there was an issue with the foundation not being on bedrock. In fact, I believe at the northwest corner or whatever, you had to go down, 10 feet before you came to bedrock. Do you see any of that happening here? I mean, how solid is the foundation of this building?
So my assumptions are that it's the same as barn number 7. I don't have any indication that it's different. My guess is if you had issues with barn number 7, you probably have them here. And in fact, one of the recommendations we made in the original barn 7 analysis was to upgrade some of those foundation elements. And I would guess if you looked at it, this one probably has a similar, if we looked at it in more detail, we'd probably come to a similar conclusion. We need to increase some of those.
Yeah. The distance down to the bedrock was different at the four corners of that barn. So unless you dug here, you wouldn't know, right?
Yeah, I mean, short of uncovering it and digging down, we'll never know, because you can't determine that just by looking at the soil.
Mr. President, Paula.
Clarification. When you were talking about life safety standards, did you say you are not sure whether this building would currently meet life safety standards to get anybody that was in it out? Or do you need to do testing, or do you not believe it stands up to life safety standards now?
Because of all the drywall, shear walls in the level below us, there is a lot of lateral capacity down there. I cannot make a definite answer on that because I haven't done the calculations. I don't know. I haven't went through that. That analysis is involved and probably, $6,000 or $7,000 of time to go through and create it. based on my past assumptions and looking at this and other reports that I've seen written, this one is better than most. I'll put it to that, because there is all those additional walls down there. Whether they're tied in, though, it could be better if they were tied in. I'm not sure if they are, if it had anchor bolts or nails into the ceiling, but things like that, again, take a lot of time and money to open up, to start testing and find out.
And you said that testing would be about 6,000 to 7,000.
Well, I know on Barn 7, our fee for the upgrade on that was around 10,000, and then we had 6,000 for the original review of it. So we were right around, 14,000 for that, for those upgrades. This one, because it's covered, would probably take more time. Opening it up, I would guess we'd be in the $20,000 range, so it's a chunk of money to go in and find out.
Thank you.
Mr. President Whitney?
I also have a question, just as far as you were talking about, because if we wanted to use it as an existing building, how we are now, and talked about the seismic upgrades. Are there any fire safety upgrades that would need to be done if we wanted to continue using it the way that we've been using it?
As far as fire safety goes, it's not my area of expertise, so I can't comment, unfortunately.
Mr. President, AJ.
Typically the fire marshal isn't coming into existing structures and making you build them up to fire code. Bellingham is a very old city. There's lots of buildings that aren't necessarily up to fire code, and unless, like he said, you make major changes, then you start to get requirements from the fire marshal that make you bring it up to code. So just a clarification on what Leslie was kind of saying. So the Barn 7 foundation wasn't bedded into the bedrock, and the assumption that that's the same here is probably valid. Do we see any indication of this barn sinking as a result of that? I mean, it's been here 60, 70 years now. Do we see signs of that sinking, that it's actually a problem? It seems like if it would have been a problem, it would have already been a problem. That other than barring seismic activity, liquefaction of the material that it's currently sitting on, are we actually looking at something that could be a problem in the future in that regard?
So it really depends on the soils underneath it. If it's a sand with a lot of moisture in it, the weight of a building on top of it will continue to push that water out slowly over time. Usually it's in clays, and you could have settlement for hundreds of years under something like that. We typically do not have that type of soil around here. Again, I'm not a geotech engineer, so that's well outside my expertise, and if that was wrong, I'll admit to it, it's probably wrong. I would say with this structure, any settlement, major settlement or large settlement, you probably would have seen by now. There's no new loads, no big ones that are going to show up, and that settlement that I talked about that takes years usually is very slow. So if you do have that here, it'll be another 20 years before you see anything from that.
Mr. President, Karen.
I have two questions, actually. You were talking about the upgrades that could trigger a seismic, getting us up to seismic code. Are there other codes that you're aware of, even if you're not an expert in them, that could be triggered by those upgrades, even if it's just replacing the siding or whatever?
I think it's just the valuation. The ones that I hear about are the valuation, and then those structural components. I know in the bigger cities, Seattle, they're trying to force some people to upgrade, and they are passing laws where they say, as of date, you shall upgrade. In California, they've passed that. I would assume someday those will eventually make their way up here, but at this time, I'm not aware.
But are there other codes besides just getting up to code with seismic activity that could be triggered?
Oh, like fire code.
Yeah, or electrical, I don't know. This is not my...
The energy code is a big one right now.
Okay.
And a lot of old structures have a hard time meeting that. So if you do changes, you may want to check the energy code. I know everybody who's built a house recently who has all the insulation in their roof and everything knows it's significant these days.
And those might have different triggers, different things that would cause those to be required.
Yes, and I would talk to an architect or a designer because they know those a lot better than I do.
Okay, and my second, I guess now I'm on my fourth question, but is if we were to maintain this the way that our reserve study says, or take into account your recommendations that you made, do you see any end in the useful life of it, or as long as we continue to maintain it and make these moderate upgrades, as needed repairs, I guess I would call them, do you think the building being used as it is, could be used into perpetuity, or do you see kind of an end to that where at some point this building is no longer going to be useful?
Eventually, a seismic event will hit, and that'll pretty much, end that. So short of a seismic event, everybody knows that's going to happen, right?
It's going to end a lot of things.
Yeah.
Most of the Pacific Northwest. So, for our foreseeable future, I don't see a problem. You could continue using this. I think some of the building officials and other people are leaning towards more restrictive codes, and the energy code may be a big one in the future that comes up, and you may lose use of it because of that, because it hasn't met energy code.
Okay, so you think that there could be regulations and restrictions that could force us to either make upgrades or no longer use it as it's being used, but not necessarily the building itself deteriorating?
Yeah, eventually. I mean, even the building eventually will deteriorate if you're not putting maintenance into it. It needs to have a maintenance budget. It is of the age that there probably is things every year that have to be done. If you do those, it's going to help, extend the lifespan of this building. If you don't, that end will come a lot sooner.
Mr. President, Steffi.
Okay, so I'm asking this because I know that a lot of community members have asked about preserving the historical part of the building. Is that a possibility to keep this main building and build anything over here? Is that?
I'm assuming by over here you mean barn 7, or that was taken down, or barn 6?
Yes, all of it, all the rest of it. What if we just wanted to preserve this barn as, a historical piece?
Preserving this barn as is can happen as far as I know. I don't see any reason why that can't be.
Right.
Even if it wasn't used anymore.
Right.
Barn 7 has about half the area. I'd have to go back to look. That is eligible for rebuilding. Their half lost the window when it was taken down for being able to rebuild due to the creek buffer.
Okay.
Barn 6 is still fully eligible to be torn down and rebuilt on, but there is timelines there and those timelines don't start though until the barn's taken down.
Okay.
So as long as that barn stays standing, you have it's grandfathered in per se.
Okay, so if we needed to find out what our community wants to do, how much time would we have?
At this point, you have unlimited time as long as the barn doesn't come down.
Okay. Thanks.
Mr. President, AJ.
I guess this probably is not a great question for you because you guys are not electrical people, but it seems like in this building, the major electrical usage and componentry that we have is likely in the gym with these elliptical machines and things like that. If we maybe built a smaller structure that was up to current code to house like that type of equipment that is a heavy electrical loads and things like that, is the electrical code you were talking about potential? I mean, this is all potential that our county legislative branch and council makes these changes to our existing code, that we would have to then potentially be forced into retrofitting these things. If we're moving some of our more heavy electrical componentry out of this building and into something newer, like would that help alleviate some of those concerns potentially?
I would imagine so, but I can't answer that definitively.
What is the current occupancy on the building? I meant to look to see if there was a sign on the way in, and I was.
There is a sign.
There's a sign under the exit.
Okay.
Norm, do you
I'll
know,
look.
do you happen to know what it is off the top of your head? But there is a, I'm pretty sure there's a sign up
Can
there.
you just say something?
Yeah, I thought it was 460.
Place your bets. Is that the full building or just right here? Quick, go get the scale. 450.
450.
I don't know. Is occupancy by floor, or is that's the whole building?
It's on a square footage basis is how they calculate it.
So it's the whole first and second floor, 460.
I'm not positive, I just know square footage is how they calculate it.
Board members, any further questions for our guests? Oh, go ahead.
Just one quick follow-on to Paula's question there with Quinn regarding the financial costs of the further studies. Quinn's numbers that he are citing are the numbers that he requires for doing the full depth. The other large component to that, which is probably equivalent values, is the destructive portion and then repairs. And that can be different levels of, depending on how in-depth Quinn goes for what we do. It's about, a third of the cost for taking it apart. It's 2/3 the cost to put things back together and make it look like it does right now.
Okay, anything else, board members? Guests, thank you. Do we want to take like 2 minutes for community questions to this team, or is that okay? Just making sure. Okay, so I know there's at least one. Go ahead, Sam.
Can you go to the mic? Just so everyone can hear.
Sam Shahan, Whistling Swan. That floor has significant dip in it, and is that the result of sagging somewhere, or was it built that way and been that way for a long time? But back over there, it's got a hell of a dip in the floor. You got a little bit over here, but that one's really sagging back there. Is it something that's increasing? Is it something that had been corrected, but they left the floor? Anyways, that was a question there. And what would be the weight limit for this floor of heavy equipment such as a scissor lift coming in here that can get up there? So is this floor solid enough to hold some scissor lifts? Because I'd heard there had been some scissor lifts come in to do some stuff, and I just hate to see one end up in the gym.
So as far as the dip in the floor, that could be settlement, it could be ongoing, or it could have been built that way. At this point in time, I don't know. The only way to really tell would be to get a surveyor up here and monitor it for several years to determine if it's moving. If it's not moving, it was probably built that way. So as far as the scissor lifts, I would assume that a scissor lift would work up here. Usually they're not that heavy. If you have just a scissor lift, if you had 30 of them up here, we'd probably have an issue. But again, I'd have to look at a scissor lift, its specific requirements, and check the floor for it, for any professional review of it.
David, question for them?
Yes, in Barn 7, the powder post beetles, like the beams, there were a couple major beams. You could run your hand between the upper part of the beam and the lower. It had been so deteriorated. It was as if the roof was holding up the beam instead of the beam holding up the roof. I mean, there are a couple, to the best of my recollection, there were two beams that were completely like that, and there was evidence of powder post beetle damage, quite obvious and evident whenever we went in to see that. I don't see that kind of thing here. I don't know whether, the folks who do this type of thing can take a look at, any evidence around here. I don't see any of the beams, any of the structural things anywhere near what was in existence in Barn 7. And they had cut into the floor here in Barn 7 as well, so they could take a look at the structural below the floor level. It was quite obvious that there were really serious deterioration in those areas. I believe there are some sections around some of these major beams that were cut into to see what's below the floor level. And so there's a certain amount of that I don't know how much, we're asking questions about those things.
Mr. President, if I may, when the test was done on Barn 7, a test was also done on Barn 8, and it was cleared of any the beetle infestation. When the test was done on Barn 7 about the beetle infestation, it was also done on this barn, and this barn was cleared of any of the infestation.
Go ahead, Karen.
I recall maybe last year, I think we took the tiles out of the sunshine room, which would have been right next to where Barn 7 was, and did some treatment and maybe looked into it a little. Does anybody know if anything was found then, or was it just preventive? Were you here then, Joe, or was it before you?
There were some tiles taken out. There was some small infestation, nothing major, and it was abated. It was just very localized, but
Okay.
they did treat that.
Okay,
AJ?
Sorry, I just one more question, not to make you stand there more, Nancy, but, so one of the pictures and things stated was there in the attic, there was a water-filled bucket overflowing. Is that attic part of this roof attic or the flat roof attic? It was right behind that door. And is that, okay, so that's like in where it transitions from flat to our pitched roof, kinda?
It's the lower pitched roof or the eaves that come out over the barn, but it was, if you go in that door, I'm guessing it's still there.
Okay, and then I guess second question, or follow-up question on that is not so much for you guys, but more for Joe. Like, have we looked into that at all? Do we know why that's leaking? What is actually leaking? Do we have any sort of?
I have no idea on that. I will get Bruce on that tomorrow, though.
Okay, I think, yeah, that'd probably be good. We don't want overflowing buckets.
Yeah, we do not want overflowing buckets.
That's on bucket duty. Especially, it sounds like maybe it's a footing around some sort of exhaust vent or some sort of penetration. It could probably pretty easily be fixed.
That probably is, I would guess the same thing. It's probably some type of ventilation. It probably just needs to be hard.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great if you could let us know on that.
One more question. It says, are you, ma'am?
Nancy Alionak, Sandalwood Circle. Could you post this gentleman's most excellent report online so those of us who like wading through jargon can read it?
Go ahead.
Nancy, that will be online. I want to send it to the, I wanted to send it to the board first to let them look at it and review it, and then it will go out.
Tyler, Quinn, thank you so much for being here this evening. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll dive into property owner comments for 15 minutes.
This won't take 15 minutes. Nancy Alionak, 4 Sandalwood Circle. So let's take a look at how the PNW company and their contacts in Sudden Valley handled permitting for a Barn 7 replacement building after the original Barn 7 building was demolished due to the beetle damage. Because yes, there is a permit out there. PNW asked the county for an exemption to the Shoreline Management Program substantial development permit requirement for the Barnes 7 location. That kind of exemption must be requested within 18 months of the demolition date. So let's look at the Barnes 7 timeline. Barnes 7 was demolished February 1st, 2017. 18 months for that time period expired August 1st, 2018. PNW did not apply for a permit exemption until May 8th, 2019, a full 27 months after the actual demolition and 9 months after the 18-month time period expired. So, how did PNW get county approval? Well, someone misstated the demolition date on the county application. Instead of demolition in 2017, someone put down 2018. So the application appeared to meet the county's deadline. It gets even more interesting, or not, depending on your outlook. Someone also misstated the Barnes 7 address on the application. Searching for Barnes 7 doesn't work because the address on the application is for Barn 10. So, thanks to these permitting malfunctions, Sudden Valley does not have to apply for a shoreline management program substantial development permit, thereby avoiding a troublesome public comment period. There is an additional point to consider. If you read this agenda, you'll notice there is a code of conduct resolution, which is really a non-disclosure agreement at the end. That agreement silences curious members that might want to ask questions and communicate answers. After all, what could there possibly be to hide that you need that kind of agreement, non-disclosure agreement, particularly one that is illegal according to the Washington state nonprofit laws and against illegal according to our bylaws? Thank you.
Any further member comments?
Clive Allen, 9 Strawberry Canyon Court. I want to change the subject. I want to direct this question to the parks and trails people. Our house backs into the park of Lost Fork Park, and to my knowledge, we do have an official dog park, right? And this park, when we first came here in 2004, had a beautiful, big, and I mean big slide that our grandkids used to play on. I played with them on it. Over the few years, due to budget constraints and lack of maintenance, that slide was removed. And now, the park suddenly become a dog park. Now, I have no axe to grind with the people with the dogs because they do a good job. They pick up the dog business and that, so that's no problem. But I'd just like to know whether this is a park or a dog park or a regular park, or it's going to be completely closed.
So we have various designations of parks that we've gone through, and it's a work in progress, and I don't exactly recall how we designated Lost Fork Park, but we have high-use parks that are priority 1. We have medium-use parks that are priority 2. So it depended on how frequently they were used or how much usage they got, how developed they were, and then on down to what we call just natural parks, which are open spaces. They're designated parks. We can put signage on them. We can at any time upgrade or put development in them, but that kind of helped our priorities as far as maintenance and as far as looking into them for upgrades. I will tell you that I know that Lost Fork isn't on our current priority list for upgrades, but you're always welcome to come to one of our meetings and you can talk more about it, and we can always work on signage if there are issues there. We would love to have people with specific knowledge of parks. We have a lot of new members now, but it's always great to have people that have specific neighborhood park knowledge. It's kind of tricky here because we have these parks that are kind of pocketed, enclosed in homes. I know where yours is. I've been down there to see it. But not all the committee members really understand the specific issues with those parks. So I know you've spoken about it before, but I'd encourage you to kind of come and get everybody re-educated on what it is and help us work towards solutions to getting it better for you. So it's on the list. It will not be closed, but it's probably one of those priority 1 or 2s. I know it's not it's not like the Barnes Park here or one of our beaches or something. Thanks.
Learn from prior experience here. My name is E.J. Leday, and I'm here tonight to bring up some concerns that I have, that I've seen, and I've talked with some of you on posters on Nextdoor. There are various other social media that have been going around. And it's about problems that are causing all kind of distrust and division in this beautiful community association that we have. Now, I've been here since 2003. I know there's some people who've been here a little bit longer than I have. There's been people who just moved here. And the demographics of this area, as far as population, has certainly changed. There are people who've been here, like I said, a long time, and people who've come here just recently, within the last 3 to 5 years. And what I've seen and what I've talked to with very well-intentioned people on all sides is there's a hurt, and there's a hurt created through distrust and poor communications. Now, I'm making a proposal, and I've sent that proposal to essentially all the members of the board, and I've also posted it out in Sud Valley, but in Nextdoor. But I'm assuming that not everybody is on Nextdoor, not everybody uses Facebook, and so on and so forth. So here's what the proposal is. I propose that we have a third-party contractor come in here, because I've been labeled, as many other people, as being belonging to Friends of Sudden Valley or Sudden Valley 2020. And because I've been labeled that, people don't trust me. And I understand that. And you know, what I've noticed in some of the comments is that people are really, they're cheerleaders for the cause, and there's nothing wrong with that. But we're all neighbors here. And when I see demeaning comments and slurs being thrown out, it's terrible. There is a constructive process that can address all those problems. I know that. I've used this process for 35 years. It'll solve any event-based problem. And some of the problems, I'll throw them out tonight. All of you are aware of them. HOA dues is one. The acronym WUCIOA, so on and so forth, okay? And so anyway, it's a problem-solving process. It costs time and money, but it does work. And I'm doing that because I think we want to save this beautiful area that we all live in and we appreciate it. And we, again, are all neighbors, and we should treat each other with respect. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. D'Angelo, for clarifying that this building didn't have the beetle infestation. Maybe going along with this gentleman who just spoke, I think the issue of the disharmony doesn't relate to the neighbors, at least I hope not. I'm good friends with the Luttrell family. I didn't vote for their son, but yet we're friends. I think the issue, to put it simply, there's three issues. The golf course. Some of the golfers think that maniacs are going to chop it up and turn it into a go-kart track or a bike track. I'm probably one of the most adamant persons for accountability, yet I'd like to keep the golf course even if it loses $100,000 a year, because we'd spend $100,000 to maintain a wilderness zone. So if we could get the golf course, the golfers satisfied that no one wants to steal the golf course. The second point is the marina, which actually makes money. But if I was a boater, I can't go to the dog park every day. The roads aren't maintained. There's potholes big enough to lose a small car. And why we can't put gravel in is beyond my recognition. And the third point, and it's a personal point, but I think it is important to many, many people in this room, is the dog park. And Ms. Burchard, what are the plans? Is that fence going to go through and cut the dog park by 2/3, or has that been shelved, or do I have to always be in fear that the dog park's going to be ruined?
You want me to respond?
Yes,
We
please.
just talked about this at the last meeting as well. There was a group that came together. It's actually been almost a year and a half now. It was Dog Park Advocates plus our committee that got together, and we agreed on, Mr. D'Angelo's well aware of this too, a very good plan. And basically what it did was it just opened up the beach area a little bit. So right now those posts come in towards the swimming area, and they would go out a little bit towards about where that bench is, if you're familiar. So the bench would be inside the dog park area. And it would open up the swim area a little bit. It would make sure that they're not crossing right now. So right now you're in the off-leash area, and you're also in the swim area. And we are working on trying to get that moved forward. So that is the current plan right now that we are working towards.
Well, that sounds like a very reasonable solution. Let's work together, right, Mike? But the last point I want to make, thank you, Karen, I'm glad to hear that news. The last point I want to make, though, is are there 5 people in Sudden Valley that can count up to 3,000? I mean, is that such a high goal? I'm really concerned about the fact that the count was screwed up on the election. And if people wonder why there's mistrust, if I can't find, we don't need to hire an accounting firm like the Oscars and the Emmys to count. I think we have 5 honest people that can count to 3,000 in Sudden Valley. That being said, what's the accountability for the screw-up? I mean, the state of Iowa has probably lost being the first state in the nation to have the primaries. And obviously, nobody even knows that Sudden Valley exists. We're certainly not on that, up that high. But it does bother me that we can't find a group of people who can honestly count the votes. And I hope the board is planning to hold somebody accountable for that. Thank you.
I'd like to respond to your comment. I'm going to make a report tonight later on that I hope everybody will listen to. I'm very comfortable with how the vote turned out. And I'll talk about it later, and hopefully you'll stay for my statement.
Any further board response to property owner comments? If not, we will move forward with our consent agenda. We'll need a motion to approve our consent agenda.
So move.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you. We'll move into our general manager's report. Go ahead, Joe.
Good evening, everyone. Just going to go over a couple things. As Andrew had mentioned, we do have our first coffee with the president this Saturday from 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock downstairs. I also have scheduled the third annual contractors meeting where we have contractors who build out here come in and go over ACC rules, regulations, what we expect from them. So that is on the books for March 25th. Also, we have DNR Forester. He will be coming in to tour the facility. Jenny, who is our ACC person, has been going to some forestry classes, and the gentleman who is teaching it is actually going to come in and walk the property with us to give us some ideas. Along with that, we are going to be working with Jenny Coe from Community Wildlife Resilience Coordinator for Whatcom Conservation. She is going to come out, we're going to get a day where she's going to come out and actually give a presentation and a talk and education to all the residents out here for Firewise, so that we can be better prepared. Also, the new cameras are in here in this barn. They were put in last week, so we are all now being watched. So they are there. They watch. So if we have to have something, if we need something, they're more preventative than anything else. Accounting. Operational income last year was $140,817 as opposed to an $865 loss the year before. Monthly, the 2019 average monthly collection rate was 96.7. And additionally, current average of 96.3 for the last 18-month period. Again, our L&I rates continue to drop. We are now at a 0.67 experience ratio. This also resulted in a 33% discount for our rates. So we are doing a very good job with our labor and industry. So no one is, all the training that Bruce and everybody is doing, as well as Lisa, is starting to pay off. Recreation, the park down here, or playground, is going to get finished. Hopefully here in this next week to 10 days, Mother Nature has made it rather difficult to get some concrete footers poured. Every time you go to pour it, it rains. But that is that will be done over the next 10 days. Also, there's been some painting done, if you see the pictures, throughout the downstairs to make it a little bit more attractive. One of them is in the infant room, and then the children's reading nook. You'll see some pictures that they have done. Our January fitness center visits, total visits are 3282. That's actual people who hit how many cards have been hit. Unique users, individual users, is 2,441. So there's a fair amount of activity for the month with a little over almost 2,500 unique users for the gym at Fitness Center. Golf right now is showing better than last year at this year to date. We're about 12% ahead of where we were last year. So we are current revenue of $160,668. The focus right now is we have 23 outings books. We're getting 7 new ones. There's just one more of the Winter Series events they have about 100 players in them each event. So that, we have one more that's March 22nd, that'll be the last one. We have had a fair amount of rain. 49% above average year to date. So we have had a boatload of rain here. It's kind of set some things back, but irrigation process, just to let everybody know, they're on hole 8 of installing the new heads, so they're moving along with that. Roadside cleanup, we're still working on that from the winter storm. We were all set and ready to go, and then we had to retool again for some more snow that was possibly coming, so we had to tear down and put everything back. So now we're in the process of tearing down and getting all that cleaned up. We have replenished the snow supplies in case it does snow again. Public safety, there will be a grab and go April 18th, 2020. That'll be here in the dance barn from 10 to 12. Everybody worldwide is worried about the coronavirus. We have been getting updates from Whatcom County DEM quite regularly on this. We do have a seminar that Norm, Lisa, and myself will be sitting in on tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock to give some more updates on where it stands and what some of the processes that they're going to have in place for the county. So as we get more information with that, we will definitely keep everybody informed on that. There was a self-defense class here for women on February 15th and 16th. There was about 15 ladies in that. We're looking to probably try to do another one, so that's a good thing. And as we get more information on that, we will get that out to the community as well. Does anyone have any questions?
Mr. President, Leslie.
One question on page 5 on the dues collection rate. Am I correct in understanding that this is per month? This is not cumulative. We see that it is lower in January of every year, but after that, our collection rate is 95, 96, and above. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
Mr. President, AJ.
All right, I got a number of questions here, so bear with me. The DNR.
Could you tell us your page?
First page of it, so page 4 of the packet. You said DNR Forestry's coming to talk with us about Firewise in March. Is this the first time we've had DNR out to do something like that?
To the best of my knowledge, yes.
I'm just kind of curious what the goals are and if that's something that the board could participate in as well.
Yeah, anybody can participate in it.
And when, I'm guessing
I have to get the date on that.
Midday, workday time
It's probably going to be a Monday through Friday since this is a DNR guy. He's going to come walk through the community, help us identify some Firewise areas, some trees for removal going forward. It's an overview, and again, as far as I know, AJ, DNR has never, that I can see, has ever been out here. So this will be a good thing, as well as tying in with Jenny Coe. Norm and I attended a meeting for DEM about fires, wildland fires. Eventually, there will be fires. There's no way around it. So the more we can get prepared and the more we can educate the residents and do things that are proactive, it's better. So the more guys and the more people that we can get in here who can educate us, that's what we're trying to do.
Okay, that sounds great. Could you email the whole board that date and time when
I will, as soon as I
DNR
get
is coming? And then just to follow up on your Jenny Co., she's providing that to the community, correct?
Yes, that is a community-wide program.
I encourage everybody to attend that. I agree with what Joe just said. We just had a fire in our community, I think 2 years ago maybe, in Gay 5. It was put out relatively quickly. It is a serious topic that needs to be addressed in our community, and it should be one of our main priorities because we have the potential to be the next Campfire, the next Paradise, California. Let's not kid ourselves that way. So, yeah, I would like to reiterate, encouraging people to join in on that presentation.
Can I interrupt just for 1 second? Are you in contact with Ann Moses, who has been doing the Firewise? 'Cause
Ann is no longer a resident in here.
Oh,
No, she sold her house.
I didn't know.
I did speak to,
Okay,
I
but
did
I
speak
knew
to
there
her
was a-
before she,
an active
yeah.
group.
I spoke to with her before she left. She filled me in a little bit about what some of the stuff she has done. But now with the DNR and then Jenny Coe, we need to ramp up a little bit. We need to be more prepared. We do not need to be a paradise.
Agreed. All right, so moving on, page 5 of the board packet under accounting. So we have a $140,000 operational net income. Is that the amount then that will be applied to the SURF loan that the board voted on and approved, I don't, a few months ago at this point, I think?
Yeah, it's been probably a few months.
Oh, yeah, that will be the amount.
Okay.
I just need the go-ahead to do it, and I can apply it to it.
And then, just in that same aspect, sorry, I lost my train of thought for a second here. The net operational income for the golf course last year was positive for the first time in 10 years? How many? Quite a few years.
Quite a few years, yes.
I'd just like to say that's very encouraging. And, you know, one thing we know is last year was a low rain year. This year is a high rain year. We are seeing trends that we're staying on the same pace, and I like that. That is.
One of the things with golf last year, AJ, we did lose 6 weeks of complete golf, February and half of March.
That's
So,
as well.
even though we had lost it altogether because of snow, even though there's rain, with the tournaments and the events, they will play in the rain.
Yeah, so then bringing me, that kind of rounds full circle to another question I have. It looks like we're on pace. We have 23 outings booked, 7 new ones. Do you expect us to exceed the 39 outings from last year, or is that just kind of a lot of those renewing from the same
A
year?
lot of them are renewing. The ultimate goal is to continue to build that.
Yeah.
It's such an easy way to make revenue. The course is only down for 4 to 5 hours. You get them in times where the tee sheet might be lighter, so it fills a void. And here's the thing, again, if it's raining, they're gonna play. Now, if it was a full tee sheet on a normal day with normal members and normal public play, and it rains, you're gonna lose that. So the outings are nice, so we can keep taking some. And, an outing could be 40 players, and you're looking at 6 or 7 holes for a small shotgun or 10 tee times. I mean, there's a lot of ways you can cram 40 people on a golf course.
Excellent. So page 7, so I asked in the last general manager's report, there was a January 19 number to January 20. I believe we had about 7 more employees from 19 to 20. And it was stated that people weren't off the books yet. We still have 6 additional employees from 19 to 20 for February. Is that still the case, that we're just on the books, or?
There would be people who would be returning, i.e. lifeguards or something like that. We just keep them there.
Okay.
Is that it?
No. So page 11, your reservation and rentals, looks like we created some room by moving some jet skis over to the marina, which makes complete sense to me. You talk about a wait list in areas. I'm just kind of curious how many residents or vehicles we have on a wait list. Are those typically RVs, or?
That's RV storage. There's 13 on the wait list, but they are RVs.
How many?
13.
Okay, that sounds great. And then, I think, so page 14 under maintenance, I guess we have a lot of pretty graphs and things of that nature and charts and stuff for all these other departments, and we have this huge number of hours in the beginning of this that we talk about, and there's 1,085 hours of maintenance, backlogged of corrective repairs, 629 hours routine preventative, 120 hours per week maintenance workers. We're showing some of those hours per month, some of them per week. We're not showing the amount of workers. I would like to see in the general manager's report something from our maintenance management software that kind of shows like what tasks we've.
You want a graph, you want graphs like we have with everything else?
I guess I would, there's some verbiage below that kind of discusses some of the things that we did do, but there's nothing discussing the things that we left undone. So just to kind of see some better details on that breakdown of like, you know, so we can see, yeah, we did these things and yeah, those make sense. That should take priority over these other things that we didn't do that we didn't have the hours to accomplish. And then I believe we just got an update today just for the community on the coronavirus from Whatcom Health. There has been no reported cases as of yet, and the risk is still low. However, they expect that to travel here at some point. And that was, so I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, Washington State has one case right now. And Lisa just said they have recovered. There was supposedly a report of 7 in Vancouver. Again, I don't know the status of those, but it will get here.
So I got one last question, sorry. Security, public safety, there is some talk of dealing with illegally parked vehicles. I'm just kind of curious what kind of vehicles we're talking about that are illegally parked and how are they illegally parked?
They're generally illegally parked vehicles are cars or trucks that are parked on Sudden Valley property.
So like in the golf parking lot, you mean by Sudden Valley property? Or what do you mean by Sudden Valley property?
By roads, alongside the roadsides, things of that nature. That's where a lot of the illegal parking comes from.
Okay.
There is a pop-up down in Gulf right now that has been tagged that will get towed. We go very aggressive. Norm and I go very aggressive removing vehicles that should not be where they should be or where they are.
And where these vehicles are, is there like signage letting people know that they're obviously parking in not the right places, or is it?
Most of the places are roadsides. They're in our ditches and our swales.
Understandable, yeah, that's not ideal. Maybe just a announcement to the community.
Well, they get
I mean, I know we've probably already done this, but I mean, maybe we just have a reoccurring monthly announcement that says, don't park in our ditches.
We had, in our snow response report that we put out, we made it very clear that we would tow if you parked in my street or in your street when we're trying to plow. We did tow vehicles.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. President, Linda.
Okay, we're going to go back to page 4. I noticed we're doing these contractor meetings at the 4 Points, the Sheridan. I think the first one we ever did, we did here in the Valley. What's the cost to us for these meetings, and what account does it come out of?
The 4 Points with food and everything is about $2,000, and it comes out of $400. And it comes out of ACC. It will come out of ACC.
Okay. Then if we could go to page 6, please. There's the chart that I'm looking at here that has to do with the AR count by status. And I guess I would like to ask the question, I can see above that where we're in the uncollectibles, bankrupt, that sort of thing, that those are maybe some people that no longer own property here per se. But then there's the less than 30 days, other AR less than 30 days, payment plans and 30 days past due, and then current. Are those all current dues payers here in the Valley?
Yeah, well, anything less than 30 days, like basically that section that you just talked about, these are all current people.
The reason I'm asking, and it's just weird, it's if you add up some of those numbers, it comes to 3146. And if I look at the current thing, there's only 3139, and that's why I wondered if some of these are people that no longer are living here, that are accounts that are, maybe this other AR less than 30 days is possibly, that are non-members. Possibly, that's all.
Well, under the other AR, less than 30 days, so that does include the marina golf areas, storage, so.
Okay, it
So
could be.
that's not
Okay.
like lots per se.
Then the other thing I had on page 7, and I don't know where this goes, we have the number of employees by month. We used to also have a report that was a FTE by department report, and that's not included in here.
That's been fixed. In fact, Joel and I just got those numbers together this week. They were too late to get into the report. But I got those numbers from accounting. The rest of these guys I pull from my own resources, but the numbers for FTE and also the cost per department has to come from accounting. And I used to get them from Ginny Norman when she was here. When she left, I got them from Jennifer Speidel. When she left, I got them from no one. So it's just taken a little time to get this together, but Joel's got a system now and is going to get those numbers to us every month, and you'll have them.
Okay.
And if the board would like it, I have them for February. They're just not in your report. I'm happy to forward them to the board.
That'd be great, I think, though.
Okay, then I had a question with golf, and it's a question that I've asked of Joel, is I know that we have all of these outings, and I think the only place that outings are reported is in daily green fees. And it's real hard to tell. You can say, well, I'm ahead here, I'm ahead in greens fees. We don't break it out into the fact of exactly how much income are we getting from our outings. When Brian speaks about this, says he has 3 sources of income, basically, and he always counts outings as a separate item, and yet they're never listed anywhere in our AR or in our reports that we get. It's just all in that daily greens fees. So it's really hard to tell. Are we ahead because our members are playing, or are we ahead because of the outings? That's the what triggers that we're so far ahead? If you don't separate it, you have no way to know. It's just a point for me that is just a bone of contention with me in golf, although I'm thrilled they made a profit this year. Wahoo.
I would agree with that statement. That would be nice information to have.
Then on page 14, and this is once again, it's a picky for me. I look at this huge maintenance backlog of stuff that wasn't done, and yet maintenance is assisting in updating and painting rooms in the community center and the clubhouse. And it's like, how can we do that sort of stuff if I have a building that maybe has leaky gutters up on the roof, which was something that was noted in one of these reports here recently, that really need to be cleaned? And should that be cleaned before somebody's down painting a room inside a building? That's all, because we've got such a limited crew.
I can answer that. The employee that's painting is returned from L&I on light duty. So it's our requirement to get our employees back to work and provide a light duty effort. So this is a way to make both of those things happen. So it's kind of a win-win.
Okay, the rest of the questions I have are for the accounting, but I'll wait till we get to that part, the financials.
Mr. President, Josh.
Okay, on page 16, under security and public safety, there is a item there that says trespass issued to SVCA resident form, which I'm assuming is from the administrative offices due to conduct, menacing of staff since 2016. I'm not going to ask for the nitty-gritty details on that.
You want them?
I don't know.
I do.
Trying to be respectful, but 2016 and something happening now, is there a reason that it was so long?
It was ongoing, and nothing happened until the last 3 months, it has started to ramp up again. Threats of bodily harm to staff, throwing stuff at staff. Profanity, I mean, the laundry list, we turned it over to Jay. Jay decided the best interest would be to trespass him.
Okay.
So we did it. And I'll make it clear, no staff member deserves that. None.
Agreed.
Mr. President, Steffi.
That didn't go on for 4 years straight. You're saying it happened intermittently. Okay,
It's
yeah,
an
great.
ongoing pattern. It would start, it would disappear, come
Right.
back, and so
Okay, so we didn't make staff endure that for 4 years straight, was my point. Okay,
you basically, yeah, you did.
Yeah.
You made him endure it for 4 years straight. And nothing had happened with this individual until, like I said, last 2-3 months. And when there was threat of bodily harm to staff and throwing stuff at staff, enough is enough.
Mr. President, Josh.
Did this happen just at the administrative offices?
Yes.
Okay.
And one of the things that was discussed is this person has options to take care of business other ways. Dues can be paid online, or not online, mailed in, or other options, so.
That's all I have, Mike. I'm easy.
Any further questions for Joe? Great report, thanks, Joe. Okay, we'll move into our treasurer's report. Go ahead, Leslie.
Yeah, the treasurer's report is here in your packet, pages 21 to 26. Would you like to go over it, or would you just like to ask questions?
Whatever he'd like to do, and then I have for questions.
Mr. President, although Josh's hand went up, Linda's voice came in loud and clear. She has a question.
I really think it'd be better if you went over the reports first, and I can ask afterwards. No, I really think that's proper.
I'm okay with that, consensus?
I was just gonna ask if Leslie wanted to, is there anything that you wanted to go over first?
Not necessarily, no. I just, you're familiar with these by now, and I just thought that if there were concerns that you wanted to ask about, that's fine, or Joel could just go through these.
Give us the rundown.
Yeah, go ahead, Joel.
Okay, I'll quickly go over them. I was going to be a little more detailed, but based on that, I think I'll be a little more. So now I'm just going to, I'll skip over the balance sheet. That looks great. Now I'm just going to turn to page 22 in your packet. So we'll just jump right into the income statement, and I'll just focus on, well, I will turn back to page 21 for a second. On this balance sheet right here, because AJ was talking about that $140,000 being paid for the SURF. So if you're wondering, oh geez, where will that come from? That'll come from that very first line item, operating cash. That's what's going to be drawn down to pay off, to make that payment to the SURF loan. And then you'll see the SURF loan down below be drawn down by that same amount. Now we'll go back to flip to page 22 in your packet. So we're just going to look. I'll just skip over the current months, since we're talking about the actual month, or the year end. So we'll just focus on the year end, 12 months ending. So obviously the good news is for the net income is $140,817 at the end of 2019, which is great. Last year was $865 loss on the operational net income. Joe already touched on this, but that means our expense to revenue ratio, meaning for every dollar of expenses, how much do we take in revenues, or for every dollar of revenues, how much do we spend in expenditures? It was 96.2%. So that just means for every dollar that we took in, we spent 96.2 cents, is what that means. Last year, obviously, if we had a net loss of 865, we were spending just a hair over 100% of every dollar of revenue. Now, go ahead and turn the page 23. One thing that I'll point out, maybe I'll circumvent Linda's question. Maybe this is what it is, actually. But, so basically on page 23 here, you're looking at, this is cash, is what you're looking at. Down below, under the obligated expense category, so it's basically right under the net available cash, 12/31/2019, that next section down there. Now, back in November, you saw $126,745 for the Lake Whatcom Water Sewer District assignment of savings returning in there. Now, since it didn't actually return in there in 2019, I moved it back over to the mitigation assignment of savings column. So next month, and when you see the Januaries, you'll see it come back, so to speak. So what I'm getting at is the SURF amount has dropped also by that $126,745. Since it wasn't technically available at December 31, 2019. In terms of the net current year cash increase, decrease, so SURF roads, mailbox, were all better than last year. Last year, those all decreased at the end of 12/31/2019. These are all showing an increase this year for 2019. Now, if we turn the page, or just turn the page to page 25, we'll skip over 24. That's just month to date. We'll just go to the year to date page. This is showing the departments, the income, the breakdown by departments is what you're looking at. Then you can see under that first column, golf. Of course, we already talked about this, but the actual revenue, $908,219 for 2019. Last year it was $798,825, which is an increase of, approximately $109,000, which gives us a net. Now, then to the right here, the second to the right column, the net income loss number for golf, operational net income, $9,837 versus last year, it was a net loss of $51,724 at December 31, 2018. So that's a good difference. Now, the far right column, you're seeing the net better worse, basically, how did it do according to budget? All of the departments were better than budgeted with the exception of admin and maintenance. And the big thing with maintenance is what's really driving this negative number is when we spent money to work on those potholes, that was charged. Maintenance was the one that we hit with working on potholes, or anytime there's an overage in a capital project that the board hasn't approved, for a capital project, I'll just say, capital project's $100 and the board approved that and it wound up for whatever reason being $105. I'm going to take that $5 away and hit operations with it and keep capital exactly what you approved. And so maintenance is the line item that usually takes that sort of a thing. And another good thing, the rec center here. Rec center is showing a net income of $23,576 at the end of 2019. They're better than budget by $20,371. So it's obvious. So it's forecasted to be around $3,000. So they did better by over $20,000. That is, those are basically the big highlights on the year-end financial statements.
Are there any questions?
Mr. President, still Linda.
Okay, I'd like to go back to, let's see. I guess you were just in rec, so we'll start with that. We'll go to page, I think it's 25. I have a hole in my 25, so I think that's what it is. It says, you were just saying that rec has a positive net income of $23,576.
Right.
It's a special assessment. It has to be rolled over into next year. How do you plan on doing that? And if you do that, doesn't that impact the 140,817 and reduce it by that amount of money, because that's not, as I understand it, the SA gets rolled over, any profit they have gets rolled over. So that's my first question.
Yeah, and Linda, that's actually a really great question, because I was actually thinking the exact same thing. So I was actually, so that's another reason why
Great minds.
Yeah, that's another reason why I've kind of held off on transferring anything at this point, because of that point right there.
Sorry, can I jump in your questions and speak to that a little bit? I've been thinking the same thing, so 3. The special assessment, yes, does have to be rolled over, but included in this net income is also outside income from pools and outside pool not rentals, cards or whatever. And I think that exceeded, it was probably around $20,000, I think, that we got for pools. It makes the question a little bit tricky, because not all of the revenue for that department is special assessment.
So maybe a proportion of
Maybe. I don't know. I'm not exactly sure how to handle it, but it's not necessarily all special assessment revenue.
Yeah.
But there's, anyway.
No,
No, we can argue, well, if you look on page 22, it indicates that the special ops assessment collected a total of $385,162, if I'm not mistaken, and that was $31,202 above budget. And I'm sure that's partly, and that's just, I'm sure, from the increased, the collection rate is what's pushing that really hard. The question I had with rec is on this page that we're looking at, page 22. If I come down to rec center and pools income, it says they made $21,755 from other forms of revenue. And if I come over and look at the year-to-date, page 25, it says that they made $36,522. And I wondered why the difference in the numbers.
One is better, worse than budget, and the other one is total revenue.
What number, Linda?
Okay, if you go to, on page 22, and you go down, that's where I started looking first. There's their regular special assessment and how much they made. Then you start down golf income, marina income, rec center and pools income, $21,755. But then when you come over to page 25, and you see how much money they made, you see the $385,162, and then it says below that, and I'm assuming that's additional income of $36,522, and I'm wondering why there's a difference, because that's an actual.
Well, one thing I can tell you is like what you're looking at on page 22. It says rec center and pools income right here.
Yeah.
So over here, see, this is where these statements get a little tricky, because this is rec, pools, parks income.
Does parks make revenue?
Picnic shelters.
Oh, that goes to, all right, just a minute. I will go look for that, and I will come back at a later date or let you know what my problem is.
Take the word that it necessarily goes there, but we do get.
Because I would assume that's facilities, but I could be wrong. I'll go look at the detail online. So my next question is, when we look at page 22, we always see with operating and operating reserves at the top, we see how much better we're doing with ops, where we're currently $131,794 ahead. But, and we have the capital reserves, and how much money we put in there, and we have the bad debt, but aren't we collecting also excess funds in each of those reserves to that 96th percentile or whatever it is, and we never show it?
Well, if you're talking about prior year collections, you'll see that.
No, current year. So if, in theory, what was 2020 was based on 92%, if we're collecting at 96%, or almost 97%, that's additional revenue, and we see it here.
Oh, yeah.
That's how much you have, and you have the bad debt, but it doesn't show how much better roads and SURF are doing with their collection rate. That's all. There's nowhere it shows that.
Here's the easy answer for this. It's all proportional, so roads and all those people will be doing better by that same percentage as well.
Okay, it's just we don't show it anywhere, that's all. You know, and given some of that one sheet that shows our, oh, where is it? Our page 23, definitely SURF can use all the help they can get, because if I'm reading this correctly, we're at a negative at the end of the year if we put the 600,000 aside. That's all. Yep.
Yeah. But that's also assuming if you actually spent all these obligations, like with the numbers up above that 594,055. I mean, the thing is, you're on the hook technically, to spend it, but you're right, if every single invoice came in, and you wanted to hold 600,000 off to the side, then you'd be upside down by 5945, yeah.
I guess my question is then, and I don't even know if you can answer this yet, or the treasurer can, is when are we gonna close all the SURF loan projects, and have we gotten all their monies? Because certainly that's the lion's share of that $1,720,000.
Well, I still believe I have one invoice outstanding for SURF, some retainage. But then when that starts coming in, then those items can be closed. And, but of course that won't affect, well, meaning like some obligations can be backed off for the SURF, is probably what you're getting at.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, that works. I'm done.
Mr.
And-
President, sorry, sir.
I was just gonna say too, by the way, for the obligated expenses, so I have a couple of asterisks. This doesn't include the SURF loan payments of $196,712. It's on that footnote down below. You'll see that number pop up again in January as an obligated expense.
Any further questions on the financials?
Mr. President, AJ.
So I'm on page 22, looking at the year-to-date and expenses. We are $74,445 better than budget on salaries and benefits. And I'm kind of curious as to, I mean, that's essentially a whole nother maintenance employee, which was approved from the 2019 AGM, and the board through that budget approved another full FTE for maintenance. And here we are with $74,000 extra sitting in our salaries budget line item that could cover a $20 an hour worker. And I'm just kind of curious as to why we're there. I know that's last year, but last year we had that much additional money that we could have had that additional maintenance worker last year, basically.
Yeah, that's true, but also keep in mind, we had expenditures to like express services for contracted, like office workers and that sort of stuff. So like as people like that started coming online as full-time employees, then expenses would basically be switching categories at that point.
And so is that why we're so over budget and contracted and professional services?
Yes.
And so.
Yes, that's, because I can tell you, like admin had $22,000 in like expenses to Express alone for temporary type labor. So like, for example, if they didn't pay that to Express, then that probably would have shown up, set into the salaries and benefits line item as well.
I mean, have we paid $74,000 to Express Services for temporary employees over the year? Or is that basically the bulk of it, in admin?
Well, I know like what I've got here, so I have 22,000, like big items for admin to Express, and then counting at 4,300. It's actually an easy report to run to see precisely how much we paid them. That could be run in a snap.
When we bring in, and Lisa could chime in as well, when we bring in somebody, we bring them in through Express and we pay them through the contracted service, that doesn't hit our payroll line.
Yeah, I know, yeah, that makes sense.
So that was some of it, as well as some of the people were, I believe, a little less, brought on less than what was budgeted originally at that point as well, so you'd have some savings there.
I guess my point is it seems like we have a significantly better than budget amount there, even if there's $25,000-ish going to Express for some temporary employees, like, we just approved another FTE for maintenance, which, as I understand, we still haven't hired yet.
It's not a full FTE, it's a current employee who's not going to go to veg control, because we don't budget it for veg control into operations.
And then I'm kind of curious, what is the cause of the overage of $161,000 in the maintenance and landscaping budget for expenses?
It was the extra road work we did, extra projects that we did for that, the extra paving, the extra potholes. Had an opportunity to get a project done, a crossover culvert that I had the opportunity to get done and ended up saving us. A 2-year project would have been around $80,000. I ended up getting the whole thing done, design and install for 51, so they were on site, so I utilized that to get it done. So we could save this year on our roads. We had it in operations, so we just did it in operations, so that we didn't have to take the hit on roads and capital.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you.
Mr. President, Karen?
I just wanted to speak a little bit to the payroll. So there's a couple of things that can also affect that. And if a person is budgeted into operations, and then, for instance, like the parks maintenance guys spend a little bit of time on capital parks projects, so that's someone that we budgeted to have operational salaries expenses, but their salaries, correct me if I'm wrong here, Joel, the salaries related to that capital project actually hit against the capital budget. So there's a little bit coming out of that for that, and it could happen in other maintenance projects too, I'm assuming, that we put certain assumptions in about what the split will be between capital and operations projects for these maintenance people, and that breakout might not be exactly the same. The other thing is that when we approve the budget, it's August, and we only have actuals through a certain amount of time. So I know what you're saying, that there was a pretty big thing. We probably could have known that we had that, but there's such a timing, we have such a long timing lag between when we approve the budget and when it goes into effect, that we could get better at forecasting, but that's something that we're always gonna have to deal with, is that we set a budget mid-year, and then we have all of this time, and then we're looking back and saying, hey, why didn't we have that? But some of it is just due to that timing. The Finance Committee, if I recall, did talk a little bit about improving some of our forecasting and looking for these things, such as collections or these big exception items, and I do think that we can get better at that, so that we're not asking for additional budget when we already have savings in the current year. That's all I have.
Oh, Mr. President, AJ.
One more question. So kind of to piggyback off what Linda was saying, with the special assessment, we had some additional money that was earned that we're talking about rolling over into next year. that money, we've taken money out of our surf account to pay for some playground improvements and stuff. Could we take that money and roll it, since the community voted to approve that money for parks, rec, trails, to cover some of those expenses, to help bring surf back up?
It actually very specifically says operations. I'm not opposed to that idea. I get where you're saying. I don't know of the legality.
I'm going to chime in on this. It's a special assessment. It's not true operations. With true operations, yes, I can do capital projects with operations. I can't go the other way, so to speak, but there's a couple, okay, so if I have $100,000 extra in operations, I can use that for capital projects. Capital can never technically be used for operations. There's only one way it can be done, is the corporation would take a loan against the capital, pay it back over time with interest. Your special assessment is deemed a special assessment for a special project in a special amount of time. I do not believe you can take that money out of anything other than that special assessment for what it's deemed for. Linda, am I right? You're shaking your head.
So is the special assessment deemed for playground equipment?
No, it's not deemed for playground, it's not deemed for the playground equipment. It's deemed for labor, and then some operations. It is deemed to keep the place running. That is again, I could check legally, but I would hedge on the safe side to say that is a special assessment deemed for a specific project, not to be used for capital.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. President, Linda.
I think I'd like to just answer him. The playground equipment and that 50,000, if I'm not mistaken, that was in reserve to actually be done last year. And that's why they used it, is it actually was in the reserve to be done. So it's once again, capital, and ops is ops.
Mr. President, Leslie.
Before we start moving the money around for any reason, I think we need to determine the source of that funding. Was it really over collection for the special assessment, or was it income from parks and rec, et cetera, et cetera? If we deem that there really is extra money there for the special assessment, we need to get an opinion on, an accounting opinion on whether we can move it somewhere else.
Okay, if there are no further questions, we just need a motion to approve the financials.
So move.
Second.
Any further discussion? Motion is to approve the December 2019 financial statements. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Okay. On to our committee reports. We'll start with ACC. Thank you. Communications.
Nothing at this time.
Okay, I'll just get to what's on here. Emergency preparedness.
It was submitted, it's not listed here as being submitted, but it was. It's posted online.
Posted online, thank you. Okay, Finance Committee,
As submitted.
okay, and N&E.
I just got one thing for the long-range plan.
Oh,
A
I'm
quick
sorry.
announcement. We have our first meeting for long-range planning this coming Tuesday, March 3rd at 6 p.m. in the multipurpose room A. And so all community is welcome to come and listen and participate, and let us know what you're thinking. Agenda will be posted tomorrow.
Thanks, AJ. N&E.
Well, I don't know where all these came from. How's that for an answer? I know that Jamie requested of me some minutes, and I have forwarded that request on to Ann Gray, our secretary for our committee. Some of these are just, I can't even address them. I can address from November 2nd onward to the current time and say as posted, but she evidently was catching up because I know she had sent me some requests last week about the minutes for the committee.
Okay. Parks and Trails. And it looks like there's a couple of committee members to be approved on that one, is that
Yes.
correct?
Mayor, I'd like to present Dustin and Carla Knight and Elise Rylander for Parks and Rec.
Is there a motion to?
That's a motion.
That's a motion.
Second.
Any discussion? Motion is to approve Dustin and Carla.
Dustin Knight, Carla Knight,
Okay, thank you.
and Elise Rylander.
Thank you. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Continuing business. Go ahead, Linda.
Okay, we're going to talk about the SGM, and I have a statement that I'd like to read. At the last board meeting, Ann Cope presented what she believed to be a compelling reason why the recent SGM should be considered suspect. Those notorious 67 ballots that were found on Saturday, and I would like to address those 67 ballots and the outcome of the SGM. First, I was present Saturday when the ballot count was initially completed, when the last mail-in ballots were opened and numbered that were from the deadline on Friday. That number was considerably short of the ballots that had been registered. For me, this was concerning, and I immediately spoke to the master counter. Next, she and I started going through the yellow and white envelopes to see if somehow some had been missed. A few were found in the yellow envelopes, and of course those 67 notorious ballots found in the white secrecy envelope case. These were opened, and the master counter retained those envelopes in a separate banded pile with a notation as to why they were segregated. Those ballots had been secured in locked cases in a locked closet that, to my knowledge, has only one key. As chair of N&E, I had those keys since becoming chair. When I indicated that this was procedure and security was in place, the response was, "So you've been told." A challenge for me to prove that this was true. What proof is there that multiple keys do not exist, allowing access to the ballots to allow someone to tamper with them? I read to you now from a statement from Bellingham Lock and Safe, our key provider. It reads, "This letter serves as official documentation verified by Bellingham Lock and Safe that as of 2/19/2020, only one key on the BZ-4 series ballot room has been cut by Bellingham Lock and Safe, and therefore is the only key in existence for this series thus far. The lock this key operates is bitted as SKD, which is a single key different series, meaning that no master, top master, or other sub-level change key exists that operates the BZ4 lock that Bellingham Lock and Safe has provided or cut. Thank you, Dan Tucker, Lockship Manager." To effect the alleged tampering suggested, not only would registered yellow ballot envelopes have needed to be inserted into the yellow envelope case that matched the number of found ballots, they would have had to have been date stamped, opened, and the unopened white secrecy envelopes then placed in the secrecy envelope case. Given that those 67 ballots successfully brought us closer to the number of registered ballots, indicate they were simply overlooked on Friday. Had those 67 ballots not been found on Saturday, no official results of the election would have been declared. The membership would have been informed of a problem at the meeting, and a recount would have been ordered to understand the large discrepancy in the number of voted ballots and the registered voters. The certification meeting, attended by a large audience, demonstrated that the number of yellow envelopes matched the number of white envelopes. Although time-consuming and tedious, the N&E committee wanted to demonstrate to the community that nothing nefarious had occurred. When it was decided that a recount would not be occurring, as the request for a recount was withdrawn, I went back to the tally sheets to see what those questionable 67 ballots represented in terms of determining a different outcome in the election. These votes were easily found, as they were the very last batches of votes counted. In total, they represented 335 votes, 149 yes votes, and 186 no votes. If those votes were not counted, the adjusted total of votes for the various directors would not, and I repeat, would not have represented any change in the outcome of the election. The very election process is the same used for the 2019 SGM for dues limitation and was overwhelmingly approved, and the 2019 AGM, where 3 new board members were elected by an overwhelming majority. The SVCA process, although perhaps not perfect, was in no way influenced by any tampering with the ballots. I hope that for the 2020 AGM, an independent third-party company can be found to offer the community a hybrid election where those choosing to vote online will be able to, and those wishing to vote by mail-in ballot may vote that way. Lastly, I would like to state that at no time did I ever witness anyone on the entity committee, the master counter, or any of the volunteer counters do anything to jeopardize or compromise the validity of the vote. I hope this brings to a close this very contentious election.
Thank you.
Thank you, Linda.
I have a question for a couple of people in the audience. Do I have anyone here that counted on that for that election? Would you please raise your hand? Is that the only counter that I have? Did I ever come to your house and ask you to sign a piece of paper? Thank you. Do I have a couple of observers that are here? Did I ask you if you were going to observe to read a form that gives the rules of being able to be an observer, and have you sign that piece of paper and return it to me? Thank you. I just needed to clarify something, folks.
Thanks.
I'm done.
Okay, item B, audit discussion. Leslie.
Yes, let me start by moving that we take from the table the motion that was placed there at the last board meeting in January. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Discussion. So the motion is?
To take the motion from the table that we placed on the table at the end of January.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Okay, now as the maker of that motion, I'd like to start with the discussion of the auditor. And a lot of information has been sent out to the board over the last several days having to do with the auditor's performance at the 2018 audit. The action, first of all, does belong to the Finance Committee to review the audit, to make suggestions to the board as to whether or not we should go with a particular auditor or not. And so it is my purview that started this whole thing. It wasn't anybody else on staff, because I don't know if I want to just read these things as we go along, but there's a lot of material that we went through. Anyway, the auditor issues that were sent to the full board included multiple errors reported by our accounting manager. And yes, we do have the emails between the auditor and our accounting manager, where he had to, in several cases, correct materials that were sent to us. Other people had to prompt the auditor to deliver the management letter, the report to the board. He didn't automatically do what was expected of him. The email from the attorney states that We are only responsible for work that he has done to date for us. And we do have the billing from this auditor, and we do show the payments that we made to him. He is basically paid up to date as far as today is concerned. And based on all of this information, I personally cannot recommend re-engaging this person for the 2019 audit. And if anybody here who can justify paying $27,000 to this person to do the 2019 audit, I'd like to hear why you believe that we should do so.
Mr. President, AJ.
So I have a couple things. I'd just like to be on the record that I voted no to take this off the table. At this point, I sent an email to the board and staff requesting a pile of information. Actually, I've sent 2 emails and requested much of the same information at the meeting that this was tabled. My biggest concern is that while yes, we did receive emails from Joel today about noonish and or later, we still haven't, my biggest concern here, and like I'm not opposed to your recommendation with the auditor, but I just want to see the evidence for myself that shows this stuff. You know, that, yes, I have this. That was given to us at noon today. I have a full-time job. I don't have time to review that stuff. Like, we need that in a more timely manner. Joe has stated that a management letter wasn't given. We've provided no evidence that that was the case. Like, Carol Holton made the statement at the Finance Committee in the meeting that Leslie referenced, which I had already previously watched, that said he didn't respond in a timely manner. I just wanted to see these documentation and or have the documentation in a timely manner to review this, to make an informed decision on terminating someone. You know, some discrepancies in the auditor, what the auditor sent over. Why was this not caught by, this is obviously, I don't believe was Joel's responsibility. I don't think he was the county manager at the time that this audit was finalized. Why were these things caught months later, and how was nothing stated before? I don't know. I basically, like, I don't feel like I've been given enough to, like, terminate a contract with someone yeah.
Mr. President, Karen.
The purpose of a financial statement audit is to provide assurance that our financial statements are presented fairly and accurately. This typed portion is what the auditor sent us as their final deliverable. That is what they were saying was fair and accurate representation of our financial statements. You don't need to spend very much time looking at that. I count nearly 20 errors on the income statement and the footnotes. In fact, which is not shown on here, if our revenues were understated as well as our expenses, and if you even do the very basic calculation of subtracting the expenses from the revenues, it does not tie to the final net income number. They call it excess revenues over expenses. That is very basic review that anybody should have done before sending us final work product. This should not have been sent to us. They are not paying us to audit the financial statements. We are paying them to audit the financial statements, and they have the responsibility to make sure it is accurate and complete. It was not. I am very grateful that those errors were caught. I believe, Linda, you brought some to our attention, and I am so grateful that you did that and that these could be adjusted. But the membership they have the right to expect that our audited financial statements are what they are. They are accurate, and that our audit provides the assurance and the confidence that they are accurate. Our staff should feel like when we engage experts to provide services that we can rely on them, and we are not expecting them to expend more of their time and energy to correct what these experts are sending to us. And moreover, we have a responsibility to our membership that if we are contracting with professional services, that we are getting those contracted services that we've asked for. We didn't get that at all. An income statement that looks like this, that doesn't even tie, doesn't even add up, that calculations are wrong, that things are in the wrong categories, that is not acceptable under any circumstances.
Mr. President, Steffi?
So I don't think anyone's arguing whether or not we're asking for the material, and it's really frustrating because even prior to you being on the board, that was asked for, and then you asked for it, and it came at noon. So is that working together? I'm just wondering, because I don't find that working together. It's really frustrating to be ignored completely when you ask for a request. And I personally saw patients. I got to use the bathroom once, and I'm dehydrated. I got to see patients all day, didn't really get to eat. And now I'm sitting here until 9:30, and yeah, look at all this crap that came at noon. So that's really frustrating. And if I were AJ, I'd be really ticked. You know, and I was waiting, I was looking at my email, is this ever gonna get answered? Is that, you know, it's really frustrating.
Mr. President, AJ.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of my point. Like, I get this, but I see a lot of lines and stuff. Like, I think I asked for this stuff like a month ago, and then in a board meeting, followed it up with an email, followed it up a month later with an email that actually brought this back on the agenda. And then it's still, like, none of the information, like, the main pertinent information that I wanted was just the documentation that shows that this guy didn't do what we contracted him to do. And I still, like, do not feel like I've gotten all of, there's still, like, this is one thing. There's still other pieces that are being stated of why we shouldn't move forward with him it's just hearsay, really. I don't have any proof that, like, he didn't respond, that Joe had to prompt him for that. Like, I just want to see that email. It's not, like, it should take about 5 minutes to produce the email, that chain that Carol Holton claims they're not responding in a timely manner, which is a vague statement that kind of has to be substantiated. Like, what's timely? 2 weeks, 2 months? Was he on vacation? You know, and part of the other thing that I really wanted to see was this guy given a list of his shortcomings, discrepancies, you know, inability to do what he was contracted to do, and given like the ability to respond to that. Like, I totally respect what you just said. Like, I agree. We want an accurate financial statement. That's the whole goal. You know, to say that like I'm an engineer, I hire other engineers to design things for me. I review their work. I don't just take their work and go, here you go, management staff. This is all skookum and perfect and 100%. Like, we take the time to look that stuff over to make sure that there isn't discrepancies or that stuff isn't coming out. Like, and that's basically my biggest point. And I guess I'm making a motion to retable this until next meeting so that I can look through the documentation that Joel provided in a timely manner, and then also get that additional documentation that I wanted in the first place.
I would second that.
There's no more discussion. We have to vote on the table.
Right. But I'm just letting you know that I would second that.
So yes, it was, because it was asked as a tabling, that request has to be voted on. The discussion is not forthcoming.
The motion to table requires a second and a majority vote.
We have a second. Call the question.
All those so the motion on the floor right now is table.
Till next meeting.
Till the next meeting to get
Provided that we have the information.
the information that AJ's requested. All those
And time to review what was given to us today.
I'm putting that into the motion, that to table until the next time, providing that the information will be provided to us in a timely manner.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 2 opposed? So the motion carries.
It'll come back.
I just gotta say that again.
Okay, now we're on to new.
No, Mr. President,
On the table.
we still have a motion on the table that has to come off the table now.
Okay.
So, motion.
Yeah.
Doesn't it just die?
The motion,
There's currently a motion, no, there's not, actually.
I don't think there's.
No, actually, there's not.
okay, my fault.
We're good.
Okay, so the next order of business is new business, which is our code of conduct resolution, which is included in your packet, which was included in a previous packet for review, I believe, in December. So we're bringing this back to the board's attention, and we'll need a motion to approve.
I'm sorry, you're just asking for a motion to approve?
We can discuss.
Oh, okay.
I'll move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, discussion.
Let's jump backwards for 1 second here. Did we not have a motion to bring this off the table, and now it's tabled?
We did take it off the table.
Okay, thank you. Mr. President, AJ.
So I guess my concerns with this code of conduct are RCW 6438025 says that the Board of Directors shall not act on behalf of the association to amend the Articles of Incorporation, to take any action that requires the vote or approval of the owners, to terminate the association, to elect members of the Board of Directors, or to determine the qualifications, powers, and duties or terms of office of members of the Board of Directors. This document is not consistent with our bylaws, and it is most definitely creating powers and duties that are not authorized under our bylaws or the RCWs for the board to endeavor, such as censure of the board, legal proceedings taken against a board member individually. It just seems to me like that we should not be moving forward with this. Most of this stuff is already included in the bylaws. If you look at like standards of, number 1.1, standards of conduct, maintain full compliance of all governing documents, must be members in good standing, already covered in Article 3, Section 1, and Article 1, Section 2E of the bylaws. Duties and responsibilities of the board are already addressed in the RCWs, and some of these duties down listed below, like regularly attend board meetings, is already listed as in Article 3, Section 5B, sub III, reviewing materials prior to making decisions and being informed of all relevant facts as part of the RCWs, recusing themselves when they have a perceived or potential conflict of interest is our Article 3, Section 3B. Conflicts in the conduct section are already in the bylaws, Article 3, Section 3B. Self-dealing, already in the bylaws, Article 3, Section 23. Solicit and receiving compensation for serving on the board, Article 3, Section 1. Interactions with employees are already addressed in existing policies. Only the president may give direction to association employees. Well, I would reason that the president can only give direction to the general manager, and it's the general manager's job to then give direction to the association employees. No harassment or whatever already covered under harassment laws and harassment policies. This document is, I don't know, it seems egregious to me. I don't think we should approve anything along these lines. And to me, it seems like this would be an amendment to our bylaws that is not something the board would be allowed to vote and approve. And a lot of this stuff is already covered in like Robert's Rules and other places as well.
Mr. President, Karen?
I just want to add, I agree that it is covered under a lot of places. I did just some research on HOA codes of conduct and nonprofit codes of conduct or standards of ethics or statements of ethics or whatever you call it. It seems like it was pretty common to have. I preferred the ones that were more positive in nature rather than focusing on what you can't do. But I found several examples, and I'm sure using Google you could find 1,000 more, but that were a way for us together to say we will act in these standards. And I think it could be good for the community going forward to say, you know, the 9 of us, 11, you know, can agree on certain things even if they're covered other places, but this is how we'll act together. It's not necessarily a legally enforcing thing. It's just a way to move forward to say we all agree to these certain standards, and like I said, the ones that I preferred were positive in nature as far as these are things that we will do. We will act this way. We will be respectful. We will be, they address things like privacy and confidentiality and things like that, and I thought they were positive for communities.
Mr. President, Steffi?
Okay, so it's illegal because of the RCW that AJ just started, so it could be nice. Although I would like to say that we're going to work together in another way other than violating our bylaws. I also don't appreciate being censored. I feel like it's a way to keep us quiet if we disagree. And what's the point in having a board? It negates the entire, I wrote 4 pages, so you guys feel happy that AJ took some of this. He obviously is thinking the same thing. But this resolution interferes with freedom of speech, which is also a constitutional right. This negates the entire purpose of having a diverse board, and it supports the theory that a core group is in charge and designates what will happen. I don't want that. I think that will not promote transparency. This resolution refers to an impartial review or an oversight committee, and that's enough to start an argument in our current climate. I don't want to have that argument. Also don't know if the board is capable of choosing an impartial oversight committee because the only people that get involved are 2 separate polar opposites in ideas. So I think we need to find another way to say that we're going to work together. I think honesty and transparency is one. Respect is another. Obviously, we could just say those things. That's in our harassment policy. It's in our bylaws. It's also in the state law. This contradicts itself because it says that we will have an impartial review or oversight committee, and then it says that the president alone decides. Sorry, Andrew, no offense, but I don't feel okay with that. Just one person deciding, I don't think that's okay. I think the whole board should decide. And basically, this is a non-disclosure or
The board president, I'm sorry, the board president to decide what?
Well, it's saying right here that ultimately the president would have the final say. Directors who have questions about the code are encouraged to bring questions to the attention of the president, who may consult with legal counsel as appropriate. Over here, you can argue that point if you want. It looks to me like that's what that is. Let's see. Another thing is that it refers to directors who violate the association's ethics policy. We don't have an ethics policy. This was copy and pasted from another usage. So when Nancy stood up at a board meeting and said that this was from a presentation for CA, I blew it up, and it says attorney and staff, personal files, RAD, personal Las Vegas presentation, January 2017, code of conduct, resolution, doc. So, it's not even tailored to what we need. And the biggest point is that it is illegal. It conflicts. We would have to change our bylaws, and that would require a 2/3 member vote. So I think that this should be moved to be dismissed because it's illegal, and the other points are carried in our bylaws or state laws or even Robert's rules, which, oh, wait, one other thing. Robert's rules says that no main motion is in order that conflicts with the corporate charter, constitution, or bylaws. Bylaws, Article 2, Section 8, unless specified in the bylaws, Robert's rules governs the association. If disciplinary action is to be taken, charges must be preferred and a formal trial held before the assembly of the society, before a committee which reports findings and recommendations to the assembly for action. The assembly can decline to impose any penalty. And then the proposed conduct code says anyone in violation of this policy may be subject to disciplinary action. The provisions in this code may only be enforced by the board. So the conflict is in who gets to decide the disciplinary action.
Mr. President, Leslie.
I just,
You totally skipped me, but that's okay. You go ahead. You've got your book out.
I did. Thank
You're all
you.
ready. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I just wanted to let you know that part of Robert's rules does describe board behavior. And in section 4, it says, debate must be confined to the merits of the pending question. Speakers must address their remarks to the chair, maintain a courteous tone, and especially in reference to any divergence of opinion, should avoid injecting a personal note into debate. To this end, they must never attack or make any allusion to the motives of members. And as part of Robert's rules, which is in our bylaws, we are subject already to this behavior, decorum, or whatever you want to call it.
Mr. President, Linda.
We're going to go back in time. We're going to go to an email from the managing director to our council at that time. And the question was, if you had to sign a code of conduct. Rich's answer, signing SVCA's code of conduct is not required for service on the board. Then there's further conversation, and I won't bore you with all of it. But what it boiled down to is you wouldn't, because this isn't required, if you do it as a resolution, and the board as a whole votes on that resolution, then the members are obligated to do this. But in theory, according to state law, you can't do that. So this is the whole thing, and it's the reason why it was brought forward back in 2016. Initially, they were going to have everybody sign again. I've signed one of them in the past when I've been on the board. But the whole point was to bring this more, it's almost draconian, I'm going to use a Kurt Casey word, draconian, of restricting the ability of board members to act and speak independently. And it's just, Rich is in here going, he said, the law is silent, but he said even governmental councils are adopting such things as this. And there might be bylaws that allow for codes of conduct to be signed. After this meeting, when this very resolution was first brought forward in 2016, we actually approved this really very simple, very just let's be nice to each other sort of code of conduct, not something 3 pages long. Even the approval of the motion was there. So it's just, I don't think we need to be going there, and I think it's illegal.
Mr. President, Josh.
Me, right?
You're Josh.
Sorry, this kind of talk makes me a little uncomfortable sometimes, but we're gonna get through this. Steffi already touched on it. There was a item in here about an ethics policy. And I don't know if that's counting this whole document as the ethics policy, but I looked around on the site, I looked in our binder that we received at orientation. I didn't see anything about ethics policy. This doesn't really get into ethics that much. There is an extra period under misrepresentation, so I hope this isn't an official document. But, you know, I think in the times that we are in, I think things are, you know, they're chilling out a little bit. But having this come to the board as a potential, I mean, this can open up so many doors, but there's a potential for silencing people, and I don't think that's really the right way to go. And I'm all for decorum and getting along, and I mean, as most people know, that's one of my strong suits, I think, with working with people. I feel that if we do have a problem with one another, or anyone in the community, or a committee member, that a conversation should take place versus slapping this in front of the board as a policy vote. I myself, while I've had to deal with some community members that have been upset with things, I've experienced some things on the board that I felt kind of violate some of these items. And one of those is being on a committee and having another committee interfere with one of our processes and taking a draft document and sending it out to community members, who then responds with really negative, divisive things when, you know, I'm just trying to do a decent job and this was during the town hall. And I'm not going to go into details because it's just obnoxious, but, you know, if this was set in place then, I'm not sure what could have happened to one of those, whoever sent our draft, board draft, to, you know, to a community member. I'm kind of trailing off here because this stuff kind of, I'd rather just talk through some of these things. And, you know, I think we need to foster inclusiveness, and I don't think this really is good for people who want to volunteer and they see this type of thing and like, oh man, there's all these rules. What if I say something like this and I get sued? And yeah, I just don't think this is the way to go, and I wouldn't vote for it.
Mr. President Paula.
First, a question. Has this been reviewed by an attorney?
It was provided by our attorney.
This was created by and given to us by the attorney?
Provided to us by our attorney.
Okay. Second, I think, given the reference just to a code of ethics that doesn't even exist, I don't know that we could even approve this right now. Regardless, it would need some changes. I would like to suggest that we possibly put this on the agenda at the board strategic planning. I think that coming together as a group and deciding what we agree on is important for us to be working together, and developing a code together makes a lot more sense, given that we can't even move forward with this to begin with. It's much more inclusive. It has immediate buy-in, and I think it speaks a lot more to working together than what this document provides. So I would suggest that we put this on an agenda item for the board strategic planning.
Mr. President, Steffi.
I think you had your hand up first, Josh. Go ahead. Did you?
There's quite a few people before Josh.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Okay, so I will go then, because I'm not going to skip 3 times. I like that idea, Paula. I'm worried, though, about the meeting with the Open Meetings Act. Can we do business at that? That's considered business. We would have to have a little meeting like this, I think, here to do that. I'm not sure.
We have a little chat right here. I know other people are in front. Do you want me to wait?
I'm just throwing that out.
I
I'm
think
not
we
sure.
might be able to, because it's something we're
Just
all
something to-
choosing to agree to. It's not something that we're putting out as a resolution. It's not something that we're holding anybody to. We're saying, you know what, as a group who has to work together twice a month and more often, this is what we think that we can and should be doing, and to hold each other accountable to that with outside of a code of conduct that feels like it could be shutting people down. I don't know that we would need that to be able to look at each other and say, hey, we're a board, let's act like we're working together, and these are the ways in which we define working well together and the energy that we're going to bring to a meeting.
Right, I agree with that 100%. What I just worry about the legality of it, or the technicalities. And then I'm, like, our lawyer gave us this. I'm a little disappointed. Is anyone else a little, that he didn't look at some of these things? Some of this, like ethics, we don't have an ethics policy. It's just like a file. Like, were we supposed to revise it maybe? It really kind of, we're complaining about the auditor and we just got this. sorry. I'm gonna point out those things. Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. Hopefully that was it. I threw that in there, Whitney, I did. I wasn't just running him over.
No, I know, I mean.
But it seems to me like it's just a file that, you know, a master file that was supposed to maybe be tailored a little bit more since it conflicts with our bylaws. I don't think he really, hopefully, looked over it. And, you know, that it was already in a lot of things.
Mr. President, there are three more speakers on my paper, but I caution the two, because one of them is me and I haven't spoken, that have already spoken. Please don't repeat anything that's been said. Just put in something new or pass. So that's Josh and AJ.
I think you should take my spot since you haven't gone yet.
But I'd like to end this conversation. I will give you my granddaughter's rules. She's 8 years old. Her rules are, is it true? Is it kind? And is it necessary?
Who's next? Mike?
If you've already spoken and you are repeating something, then please, when I call your name, say, I'm done. Josh?
I'm not repeating something, but. All right. I'm not sure when, I know this was put on the agenda previously, a while back, in the many moons that I've been on the board so far. And then it came back. My concern was that there was an email to the board regarding trustworthiness and the signing of a code of conduct and how they correlate with each other. And after that email from a community member, this is back on the agenda. So I don't want to get all grassy knoll or anything, but it's a little concerning, but it could just be coincidence. But I think trustworthiness comes from all of our actions, and you know, wherever else we can talk about something like this, I don't think that how this is written is, sorry, I'm repeating myself. I have to end that somehow, but yeah, I don't think this is where we need to be, and that's all I have.
Mr. President, the last speaker today will be AJ.
So, and I agree with what Josh has stated. I'd just like to point out too that, like, this file, while yeah, it comes from our attorney, it's also a code of conduct that clearly is, it is from a CAI conference that he provided for a CAI conference that dealt with the CAI is not a Washington state organization. They're a national organization. Every state has different state laws. Every bylaws have different abilities for these types of things to be included and stuff. And I guess one last thing that I would like to point out in it is that this is just weird to me. The board shall appoint an impartial committee, and then the committee will provide a recommendation, but it is ultimately the board that will decide this. So this is just some token committee that really does nothing because the board actually decides this stuff. And like previously stated, Robert's Rules requires disciplinary action to go through the assembly, which is the members of this community, not the board.
So there's currently a motion to approve.
Then call the question.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed?
The pin dropped.
There we go.
If we had called the question at the beginning, we would have saved ourselves about 17 minutes.
Where were you on that one, Mike?
Yeah, where were you for that one?
Okay, now we move on to property owner comments. Made it.
If I had known that Linda Bradley was the chairperson of the committee, I wouldn't have been. I thank you for that report. I totally trust you. The only thing I disagree with, Linda, we don't need an outside auditor. If we don't have enough integrity, we have more than you're a committee. I trust you. We don't need to bring anybody outside. But good job, good report. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hope, 52 Louiseview Drive. A couple things. One about the auditor. I haven't heard the number 7 emails tonight. That was something that was told before, that he had to be contacted 7 times. So you're looking for proof. That seems like something important to look for. Linda, so the 67 ballots are still contentious because you can't explain how they got there. So I'm going to give a ridiculous example. But let's say I have 67 sticks of gum in my purse. And I go back to my purse. And the gum has been removed from the paper wrapper, and it's just the sticks are in the foil. And the paper wrappers, I find them, I look around, they're under a chair. I don't know how it happened. Am I going to feel okay about that gum? No. So the fact that you can match the envelopes, it still leaves a lot of question. And that question is important, and that leaves doubt. And there is no way to explain it. You can't explain it. Nobody can explain it. So that's why I don't see an end to the 67 ballots. Thank you.
Jennifer Farias, 35 Tumbling Water Drive. I just wanted to point out that I understand that there's one key, but when you leave the ballot box open and you're not the one closing it, it doesn't matter that there's one key and only you have it. When you leave it open and someone else is closing it when those 67 ballots were misplaced.
Any board member response to property owner comments? Okay, hearing none, we'll need a motion to adjourn.
I have one question before we adjourn. I'm so sorry, but a committee member or a community member asked about the permit and one other thing. We're going to look into that or find out. Do you remember? She talked about the dates.
Yeah, I'll look into that.
Okay,
I'll get back
thank
to
you. Okay, that was all.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, 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 aye. Hearing none.
AJ, like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I didn't know when to ask.
And 53.